we started recording this session. Okay,
Yes, sir.
we will learn about API. So, what is API? API is application programming interfaces, right? Interface. It's the interface basically. So, any application, if you take any front end application or anything, if you take, we have three layers, right? We have
Yes, sir. Three layer
presentation layer and middle
application
business layer.
layer.
We have data layer, right? So presentation layer we already know it's a GUI, graphical user interface, which will be developed using the let's say front end is developed using the ASP.NET or JSP or Angular, React, right? These are the technologies they will use. So they will call the business layer. APIs they will sit in the business layer. API. Say let's say for example REST API. We have SOAP APIs, REST APIs. Okay, REST API. Now APIs. See, front end will call the this is the front end, right? Presentation layer will call the API. API will call the database, right? So data layer we will have the SQL Server or Oracle or any other database, right? Okay. What will happen? For example, if you take a weather.com website, right? So weather.com
Yes, sir.
website, what we are doing? Okay, you take
We
the
fetch the data from
if you take weather.com, let's open the weather.com. So what this website is doing? So we are searching the weather by some city or zip code, right? So for example, we are searching for Hyderabad. So now Hyderabad is the parameter here. Okay, from the front end, we are sending the parameter Hyderabad, right? Now it will. This is the front end, right? Graphical user interface. Front end is sending the request. Now it's calling the internally. It's calling the API, which we don't see it. API is calling the database. Database is responding to the API with the data in the form of JSON, right? So now API is returning that data to the front end. Now it's displayed here, the presentation layer. Clear? So
sir.
the request is going from here. So what is the request going here? Let's say for example, here you are sending Hyderabad, okay, to the API. Now API also sending Hyderabad. So now what will happen? Let's say there is a table in the database, weather table. Okay, we have weather for all the cities, right? Current weather. It's a real-time data. It's dynamic. Every minute it's updating, right? So now it will
Yes,
execute at the backend. Select start from where city equal to whatever the parameter is going. What is the parameter going now?
Hyderabad.
Middle tier API it's sending Hyderabad. Now this is returning a table. Let's say for example, it's returning in the star means all the columns, right? So let's say current temperature. Okay, like that we have different columns. So current temperature is 20. Understand? 21.
Yes.
And unit is Celsius. Okay. So like that, this is returning the data, okay, in the form of JSON. Who is returning? This is returning the data in the form of table, right? Rows. In the form data will return the data in the form of rows, right? Rows and columns. So that will be converted into JSON. So API is returning JSON to the front end. Now front end is understanding that JSON and converting that into the HTML and displaying in the browser. Understand? Applying the style sheet and all these things. That is the process. So now you understand API is an interface between two components. So here, what are the two components? Front end and back end. Okay? API is a
Yes.
bridge between two components, front end and back end here. Clear?
Yes.
So now, what we will test for API? What we will test, right? You understand now? API is a software testing type that validates application programming interfaces. The purpose of the API testing is to check the functionality, reliability, performance, and security of the programming interfaces. Right? In API testing, instead of using standard user inputs, keyboard and outputs, you use software to send calls to the API. Right? So, which software we call the API? Front end in our case, right? Presentation layer. So, this presentation layer user interface will send the call to the API. It send the input to the API. So, who will give the output to the API?
Data.
Data layer, right?
Yes.
Get output and note down the input response. API tests are very different. Your voice is not be in the mute if you are not talking. Okay, this session is recorded. So mainly concentrates on the business logic layer in the software architecture. You understand now? So it mainly concentrate on the business layer, right? So now you understand this one. Okay. UI testing starts here. Okay. Orientation layer. Now it's making a call to the API. API works here. Then it's making a call to the database. Database and sending the response back to the business layer in the form of rows or columns, right? Rows, right? So now this is converting that into the JSON and it's sending the JSON to the presentation layer. Presentation layer understands the JSON and display it into the HTML. Clear? Okay. So now what kind of testing we do for API and how we will test the API. Okay. How we test the API basically. There are different tools available for the API. Okay. So what are the tools? For example, SOAP UI we are using or Postman we are using. Let's say for example, I will show you some API here like for somebody developed the API to get all the tourists. Okay. Let me show you that one. Yeah. Okay. So if somebody asks you to test the API, what kind of information you need it? Somebody asks you to test the API. So what information you will ask? You need to have the API URL or endpoint. Kind of info needed. Test API, right? API URL or endpoint. Then you need to know which HTTP method that API uses. So is it using the is it a get method or post method or put method? You need to know that. Right? So that you will select here in the drop down. Got it? So if it is a get method, you need to know what are all the parameters you need to pass. It is a get method, you need to know what are all the parameters you need to pass, right, for the get method. If it is a post method, you need to know what is the request body, right? We'll explain you again what is the difference between get and post. A post method, we will send the request body. But here, this is a get method, we are not sending. Okay, get method, we are sending the parameters. Same way, you need to know. Let's say. So now, you need to know what is the response you will get. Response code. Every method will return some API response code. Like let's say if it is get method, it will return 200. Okay. If it is a post method, mostly it will return 201 created. Understand? So you need to know what is the API expected response code. Same way, expected response body. Understand? So these are all the things you should know. These are all the things you should know to test the API. So this is the entry question they will ask. What is the API and what kind of information you need to test the API. So who will provide this information? Say you are working in a team, some developer developed the API, so he will provide. Basically, they need to provide the documentation. Whoever developed, they need to provide the documentation for the API. Right? They need to provide the documentation for the API. Clear? Is it clear? Now,
Yes, sir.
what this is doing, this API, what is the endpoint? Let's say this is the endpoint. This is the endpoint. So this is the endpoint. And what we are testing, is it a get method or post method? It's a get method. It's a get method. So what this API is doing, first you need to understand the functionality manually, right? We are doing manual testing, right? What this API is doing. So it will pull all the tourists who are in the page 1. So here page 1 is the parameter. You see question mark, right? Question mark, parameter name and parameter value. So we are sending parameter name and parameter value. Let's send it. Okay. Now look at here. What is the expected result for this? 200 okay if it is success. If there is any error, it should return the error message. You got it? So we got 200 okay. And now this is the JSON we got. What is the JSON we got? For the first page, okay, this many records are there. Per page, how many records? 10 records. So now, functionality of this API is always latest records will be there in the first page. Now we are fetching the data from the first page. Get means we are fetching the data, right? Which is equivalent to select statement in the database. So select star from, let's say there is some tourist table. What we are doing here? Select star from tourist where page equal to 1, right? So every page there are 10 records. How many records are there? Page 10 records. How many total records are there? How many total records are there? 8720. 8720. That means how many pages are there? 872 pages. Sai, your voice is not clear, Sai. Okay. Okay. So total records 8720. So that means divided by 10, 872 pages are there. Right? So now first page we are getting all these tourists. Like tourist, every tourist is having tourist ID, tourist name, tourist email, tourist location, creation date, when the tourist got created. Is it clear? Now how many records will be there in the JSON? Tell me. 10 records. First page. Now if you send the parameter second 2, what will happen now? Now the response will change. It will fetch the data from, it will fetch another 10 records. Which 10 records it will get? 11 to 20. See? Page 2. Now you see the data is different. Right? Understand now how the API is working? Okay. Based on the parameter, whatever we are sending, see, now if you change the parameter here in the query string, this we call it query string. The query string also, the parameter is changing. Okay. So based on the parameter, the API response is changing. Okay. So this is the demo API somebody created. So where is this API? It's running in some web server, right? Nothing but a web service, right? It's running in some, it's hosted in some web server, which is giving the response. Say in real time, what will happen? First, we are doing the API testing, making sure this is working. After that, this will be integrated with the front end. So front end, let's say we have a button, okay, get all tourists. If you click on that button, at the bottom of that button, there is a table should be displayed. The table, okay, the table, the record, tourist records should be displayed. Tourist info should be displayed based on the page. Let's say you selected, there is a drop down. There is a drop down. Let me show you. Okay, it will be like this. Let's say in the front end. Okay, front end. Here there is a drop down. Where is this? Let's say here there is a drop down. Okay, where you are selecting the, here you are selecting the page. This page. Okay, you are selecting 1 or 2 or something like that from the drop down. Now here you are having some button. This button is get tourists. Clear? Okay, get tourists. Okay, so if you click, first you are selecting page 1 and you are clicking the get tourist. So now here you are having some table. Right? Here you are having some table. Let's assume you need to get the all the 10 tourists from the page 1. So we know that functionality, when you select any page, we will get the tourist info from that particular page. So in this case, if you select page 1, so here we will get how many records? Okay, records 1 to 10 we will get. If you select page 2, what will happen in the table? What columns we are having? What columns we are having? We are having tourist ID, tourist name, tourist location, right? When it was created. Here. Tourist ID, tourist name, tourist email, location, creation date. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns we are having. Right? Before there is one more. Let's say 5 columns we are having. ID, tourist ID, tourist name, email, tourist location, creation date. So every time when you send the page number, it is fetching the data. You understand now how the front end looks like? Now what API this is calling? Tell me. What API this is? Let me save this. Save as some JPEG. let's say tourists. Is calling this API, right? Passing the parameter. Now, if you pass page 2, it will fetch the another 10 records from 11 to 20. Is it clear now? The dynamic is changing every time. Now, if you send page 3, what will happen? Which records it will fetch? 21 to 30. Clear? 21 to 30. Total, how many pages are there? 872.
878.
Fetching, if I am passing the, so again, what kind of testing you will do? So let's say I ask you to write the test cases. You know what is test cases? You already learned in the functional testing, right? So now we are doing the positive testing. Let's say what is the negative scenario for this? Total 872 pages are there. I am fetching 900. What will happen? Right? Then 900 I am sending. Intentionally I am sending 900. We have 900 page, right?
No.
Right? Fetch. See? Now page number 900. Actually it should get per page 10 records. So now here total records and everything data we are not getting empty. This is expected. So here API is not failed. API is returning 200 success only, but data is not there. Is it clear? Do you understand this one?
Sir.
When you are testing the API, you need to do the positive testing, negative testing, all the scenarios. So you need to write the test cases. Is it clear? And if there is any mandatory field, the parameter, you need to send that. Let's say intentionally you are sending some wrong value for the parameter, right? You are sending some wrong value for the parameter. Do we have page number ABCD? No, right? What will happen? So it should fail, but since this is the demo API, okay, they are always displaying the first one. Understand? Actually, it should fail, but this is the demo API, so they are displaying the first 10 records, even the parameter is wrong. Clear? Is it clear? They are displaying the first 10 records. Okay. Any questions at this point? So here we look into the postman. Okay, this is the request section until this. So request we are having the parameters, headers, authorization, body, test cases, settings. So this is the response section. Okay, response JSON, right? And status, response status, and how much time it taken. How much time it took? 93 milliseconds.
93 milliseconds.
What is the size of the response? 2.07 KB. Now, sometimes you save this response. Now, save it as file. Now, you can save this as file. Some XML file. Right? Now, you say tourist dot. It's not XML, it's JSON. Okay? Now, you can open that file in the browser. Got it? It's a JSON file. Right? So, Postman, we have different options to see the response. So, this is XML. Okay? XML format. Are you able to understand? Data is in the XML format. And this is JSON format. Now, this is text format if you want to see. But it's showing XML. Okay? Right? So, they are providing different options to view the response. Clear? Do you understand? Let's say page number 1 I am sending. So now, if you are testing the API, you should know the expected result, right? Expected response. So how do you know this data is correct now? How do you know this data is correct? So what is your expected result? From where you are getting expected result? You should understand the functionality, how API works. So now what is the functionality of this API? So always the data is sorted by the latest creation date. Understand? Let's say somebody created some tourist today, that will come in the first page, first record. Understand? So always latest data will be there at the top, right? So when you are fetching, okay, page 1, always first top 10 records will come by the creation date. So this data is sorted by the creation date. If you look into the creation date, you see here when it was created, 317 yesterday, right? 317, 317, 317. Okay, timestamp is different. Clear? Right? So what should happen here? Always first 10 records should come. So how do you know these are the 10 latest records? To test this, how you can test it? You have some database, you have some table called tourist. How you will test it? Select top 10 star from tourists, right? It will get the top records, order by create date. Let's say in the database we have a column called create date. So that is coming here in the JSON. Understand? So now we are getting the top 10 records, order by the sort by the creation date. Understand? Clear? So whatever the 10 records coming here, here you need to this 10 records you need to sort by the higher date to lower date. Higher date means latest date. Okay, by default it will take ascending. Okay, we don't need to mention that. Ascending, higher to lowest. Okay, so now this record will be executed. Right? When you are sending page 1, okay, these top 10 records are coming here. Okay, so now whatever the records coming here in the same records should come here in the same order. Is it clear? Let's say this is record 1. So here it will be in the form of row, right? In the row, what are the columns we have? Tourist name, then tourist email, then tourist location, then creation date. This is the table. This is the table result sets. Now this is how it's coming. Yeah, this is. We need to remove this one. This is tourist email, location, India, and creation date. This is very important. Here, like this, 10 records will be there. So those 10 records database is sending. Right? Then what the API is doing? API is converting this data into the JSON and This is the JSON structure. For every tourist, it will be like this. 5 nodes, right? ID, tourist name, tourist email, location, creation date. So all the 10 records are coming under the data. So this is the top level information about the total table, right? Now we are fetching the page 1. Per page 10 records we are showing. Total records, the table is 8720. Total pages are 872. Is it clear now? Okay. Yes. So how do you know the expected values? Based on the functionality. If you are sending page 1, okay, top 10 records should come. If you are sending page 2, 11 to 20 records should come. If you are sending page 3, 21 to 30 records should come. Every time it's fetching 10 records, right? If you are sending some page which is not there, then no record should come. Here, sending 900, what will happen? Page number 900. That is not there, right? So, data won't come. Data will be empty. Okay, that is the functionality. Any questions? Is it clear?
Sir, no question.
Right? So, if you want to test the API, what kind of information you should know? Tell me. You want to test the API, what kind of information you should know?
URL.
Endpoint, URL,
Nice.
and method,
Info.
parameters. You should know
Yes.
the expected response
Status code.
status code. You should know what is time. If time is important, if they says the client says, hey, it should not take more than 100 milliseconds, then it is important. The response should come within 100 milliseconds. Or they says it should be less than or equal to 200 milliseconds, right? Because when the front end calls this API is taking 147 milliseconds, right? Right now directly we tested from the software. Right? Clear?
Yes, sir.